Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most intense strategic moves happening right in our own backyard. Well, not ours directly, but the Indo-Pacific. Out of nowhere, 5 top-tier nuclear attack submarines are about to park themselves permanently right on the doorstep of China's key maritime routes. And I'm not talking about a quick port visit. This is a long-term. In your phase deployment, a lot of folks are asking, is this the move that finally chokes off the PLA Navy's access to the Western Pacific? Let's break it all down, start to finish, and I'm not pulling any punches. Here's the official timeline. According to the joint statement from the US, UK, and Australia, by 2027, this underwater force will be fully operational. Here's the layout. 4 US Navy Virginia-class subs, plus 1 British Royal Navy Astute-class boat, will rotate in and out of HMS Stirling on Australia's west coast. Along with them, 1,200 American and British active duty personnel, plus maintenance crews and full logistic support. Even China state media, People's Daily, has confirmed this is the core of the AUKUS nuclear sub-program. Their goal, build a permanent underwater combat hub in the southern hemisphere to plug the gaping hole between the first and second island chains. From an American perspective, this is exactly the kind of forward positioning we've been missing. A reliable, secure foothold in a region where China's Navy has been expanding at a staggering pace. Think about it. For years, we've watched Beijing project power farther and farther from its coast. And now we're finally answering with a permanent, visible, and lethal counterweight right in their strategic rear. This isn't just about submarines, it's about sending a clear message that the Indo-Pacific isn't a Chinese lake and we're not going anywhere. It's about reassuring our allies from Tokyo to Canberra that American commitment to the region isn't just words, it's steel in the water, ready to act. Now, some of you might think, Australia, that's the middle of nowhere. What's the big deal? Don't be naive. Pull up a map. Stirling, near Perth, sits right at the southern exits of the Lombok and Sunda Straits. For anyone who knows naval strategy, those 2 choke points are the main arteries connecting the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. And more importantly, they're the LA Navy's critical backup routes to bypass the first island chain. Everyone always talks about the Taiwan Strait and the Bashi Channel. Those are the front doors. But when things heat up, Lombok and Sunda are the escape hatches, the plan B for China's blue water fleet. By parking 5 always-on, stealthy combat-ready underwater sentries right there, the US AUKUS have basically set up a permanent toll booth on China's strategic back road. And in the deep ocean, there's no borderline. No clear territory. These subs can hide, listen, and strike at will. The pressure they can put on any passing carrier group. Absolutely massive. For us Americans, this is a textbook example of using geography to our advantage, turning Australia's remote coastline into a sword pointed right at the heart of China's maritime ambitions. It's the kind of move that makes our regional allies breathe easier and makes Beijing's admirals lose sleep. You've got to hand it to our strategists. They found the one spot on the map that China can't easily touch. And they're exploiting it to the fullest. Every time a Chinese warship transits those straits, they'll have to wonder, is there a Virginia-class sitting right below me, recording every turn I make? To really understand how dangerous this blockade could be, you've got to know what these 5 subs are capable of. So let's do a head-to-head comparison with the world's best attack subs, and the gap is eye-opening. First up, the US Navy's workhorse, the Virginia-class. This is America's most advanced multi-role attack sub, 7,900 tons submerged displacement. Carries 25 Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of 1,700 kilometers. One boat can cover a huge chunk of ocean, hitting both surface and land targets. But its real killer feature isn't firepower, it's stealth and sensing. The Virginia uses next-gen anechoic coatings, vibration damping mounts, and ultra-quiet propulsion. Underwater, it's a ghost. Conventional sonar can barely pick it up in complex thermal layers. Compared to Russia's Yasin class, the Virginia has superior stealth and networking. Sure, the Yasin carries more missiles, but it's behind in long-range awareness and sustained silent loitering. And compared to China's current Type 093 series, the Virginia is ahead in quieting modular combat systems and extended deployment. That's exactly why we Americans are bold enough to push this far forward, because we know our subs can operate in their backyard with minimal risk of detection. We've spent decades perfecting underwater stealth, and this is where that investment pays off, right in the choke points that China needs to keep open. Every dollar spent on the Virginia program is now being leveraged to its maximum effect. right under the noses of the PLA. These boats are so quiet that even when you know they're there, you can't find them. And that's the kind of psychological warfare that wins before the first shot is fired. Now, the British Astute-class, also world-class. 7,400 tons submerged, its big trick, no traditional propeller. It uses a pump jet system that slashes cavitation noise at high speed, and at low speed, it's practically indistinguishable from background ocean noise. Globally, the Astute is top tier for close and ambush and covert recon. Put these two together, and you've got a lethal combo. The Virginia owns long-range strikes and wide-area surveillance, while the Astute specializes in stealthy close-in kills. 5 of these boats working together create a 3-dimensional underwater kill web with almost no blind spots. To give you a sense of scale, one advanced attack sub on routine patrol can cover 300,000 to 800,000 square kilometers. In wartime, a single sub can lock down a 1,000-kilometer front and 300-kilometer depth. With 5 rotating, the southern exits of the Indonesian Straits and the lower western Pacific will be under constant, live-fire ready US-UK submarine dominance. That's threat level maximum, and from where I stand as an American, this is precisely the kind of integrated deterrence that makes our allies sleep better at night and keeps our adversaries up late planning countermeasures. You don't need a carrier strike group to project power when you've got 5 ghosts in the water that can turn any shipping lane into a kill zone. And let's be honest, when you stack these boats against anything China has in the water right now, the technological gap is still very real. The PLA submarine fleet is growing, but they're not yet in the same league when it comes to silent running and sensor fusion. So why go through all this trouble to base them in remote Western Australia instead of Guam or Pearl Harbor? 3 reasons, each one aimed directly at fixing the flaws of the old approach. First distance from Stirling, a sub can sprint to the South China Sea in 4 days and reach Taiwan adjacent waters in 6. Compare that to Pearl Harbor, 12 days minimum from the US West Coast. Over 20 days. Long transits eat up equipment, tire out crews, and more importantly, they make you miss the window of decision. US subcommanders have openly admitted that in a conflict, the ability to repair and reinsert damaged ships quickly decides the outcome. Stirling fixes that. It gives American underwater forces double the response speed and second strike efficiency compared to Guam or Pearl. This forward placement means US subs can lurk in critical choke points around China with much greater tactical flexibility. For us, it's about being in the right place at the right time, not halfway across the ocean watching the action unfold too late. Imagine waiting 3 weeks for reinforcements while the other guy has already made his move. That's the problem Stirling solves. It's the difference between showing up to the fight and showing up after the fight is over. And in modern warfare, where every hour counts, that difference could decide the fate of entire fleets. Over the past years, China's long-range ballistic and anti-ship missiles have advanced fast, putting most fixed bases on the first and second island chains under real threat. In a high-intensity conflict, those bases could be knocked out in the first wave. But Stirling, it's so far south, way beyond the reach of China's land-based conventional missiles. Right now, Beijing has very limited ability to hit that base with any effective strike. That makes Stirling one of the few safe logistics hubs in the entire Indo-Pacific where US subs can restock, repair, and redeploy without getting flattened in an opening salvo. That's an advantage no other base offers. As an American strategist, you've got to love that. A sanctuary base that's almost impossible for China to touch, while our subs can project power right into their critical sea lanes. It's like having an unsinkable aircraft carrier, except it's on land, it's covered by thousands of miles of ocean, and it's stocked with the deadliest subs on the planet. We're not just playing defense here, we're creating a fortress that China can't crack with its current arsenal, even if Beijing develops longer-range missiles in the future. The distance to Stirling is so vast that they need a whole new class of weapons just to threaten it, and that takes time and money they'd rather spend elsewhere. Third, tactical encirclement. For decades, US containment of the Western Pacific relied on the first and second island chains. Pressuring from the east and north, reinforcements had to come from the Pacific side. But with Stirling, American and British subs can surge north through Lombok and Sunda, cutting directly into the southern Western Pacific. That creates a 2-front squeeze north and south, perfecting the US Indo-Pacific blockade. The once weak southern flank is now sealed. China's strategic room for maneuver just got a whole lot tighter. From our vantage point, this isn't just a military move. It's a geopolitical masterstroke that locks in Australia as a permanent pillar of our regional defense architecture. We're not just blocking a route, we're signaling to Beijing that there's no safe passage anywhere in the Western Pacific. Every path they take, we've got an answer waiting. It's the kind of comprehensive approach that makes our adversaries realize they're not just fighting a navy, they're fighting a network. And that network now includes a southern prong that they can't ignore, can't outflank, and can't easily counter. All right, so after all that setup, here's the real question everyone's asking. Is this underwater net really going to cripple China's carrier groups? Will it actually seal off their blue water routes? Let's split it into peacetime and wartime. And look at the facts. No hype, no panic. In peacetime, the threat is all about intelligence collection and psychological pressure. These 5 subs, with their extreme quieting, can loiter indefinitely in key straits using high-end passive sonar to record the full acoustic signatures of China's carriers, Type 055 destroyers, Type 052Ds, and their own subs. Most people don't realize every ship and sub has a unique acoustic fingerprint, like a military ID once recorded in any future underwater confrontation. The US can instantly identify which Chinese vessel is out there, its type, speed, even its operational status. Beyond acoustic data, they're also logging radar frequencies, formation patterns, and maneuvering habits over time. That gives them a complete playbook of China's deep sea tactics. That is real, tangible damage. For us Americans, this is intelligence gold. We're not just watching them, we're cataloging every move they make for the day we might need that data. And let's be honest, in a high-stakes game like this, information is power, and we're building a library that would make any intelligence agency jealous. Every time a Chinese destroyer sails through those waters, our subs are listening, learning, and preparing for the moment when that knowledge becomes decisive. Think of it as a chess match where we're recording every move our opponent makes. And by the time the real game starts, we already know their entire opening book. In wartime, the threat escalates to direct denial of passage. These 5 boats can sprint to and block Lombok, Sunda, and other secondary channels, cutting off China's escape routes. If the front door through Taiwan is also jammed, the carrier group's maneuvering space shrinks dramatically. Worse, Stirling is so far from mainland China that Beijing's coastal ASW systems and land-based patrol aircraft can't reach that southern deep water zone. They have no regular anti-sub presence there. They'd be badly outnumbered, potentially surrounded and suppressed by multiple Anglo-American boats. That asymmetrical long-range fight is the toughest nut they're facing right now. And from our side, that's exactly how we like it, forcing them to fight far from home with no local support against our best underwater assets. It's the classic American way, use technology and positioning to make the other guy fight on our terms. Not his. We're not just defending a line, we're creating a kill box, and any Chinese sub that enters it is playing our game. The PLA knows this, which is why they're pouring resources into anti-submarine warfare. But building a capability like that takes years, if not decades, and we're already 5 steps ahead. Now, to keep this massive underwater shield running, Australia is bleeding cash, and I mean eye-watering numbers. Let's look at the receipts. Canberra has set aside between 5.6 and 8 billion Australian dollars just to upgrade Stirling, new sub-piers, training centers, housing, radioactive waste treatment, and dedicated power infrastructure. On top of that, they're putting in another 8.4 billion US dollars for on-site spare parts manufacturing for sub repairs. The entire AUKUS sub program. Total Australian commitment, 370 billion Australian dollars. That's over 1.2 trillion yuan, or roughly 260 billion US dollars. That's a staggering sum for a country of 26 million people, and it's got plenty of Australians asking whether they're getting their money's worth, or just writing a blank check to Washington. For context, that's more than Australia spends on its entire military in a decade. So you can understand why some Aussies are looking at this deal and wondering if they're being played. They're paying top dollar for a system that they don't even control. And that's a tough pill to swallow for any sovereign nation. When you break it down per capita, every Australian is chipping in over $10,000 for this program. And many of them are asking, what exactly are we getting for that? But here's the kicker, for all that money, the project is riddled with holes and contradictions. The actual deterrence is nowhere near what the Pentagon claims. The biggest problem, Australia has zero experience in nuclear submaintenance or waste management. Their Navy only ever ran diesel-electric boats. Nuclear propulsion requires an entirely different safety culture. Personnel training and regulatory framework, sure, they can pour concrete and build docks, but the human factor, the specialized technicians, the safety protocols, the supply chain, it's all missing. And local opposition is fierce. Australians are terrified of becoming a nuclear dumping ground and a prime target in any great power clash. Public resistance keeps slowing things down. From an American perspective, we're asking a lot of our ally, maybe too much. And the cracks are already showing you can't just buy your way into the nuclear club. You have to build the expertise. And that takes decades. Australia is trying to cram that into a few years. And it's not going to be pretty. There are already reports of training delays, safety concerns, and a growing sense among Australian defense officials that they've bitten off more than they can chew. The local population in Western Australia is particularly vocal. They don't want American and British nuclear subs in their backyard, and they're making that known through protests, legal challenges, and political pressure. And here's the real embarrassment. The program itself has been downgraded. Originally, AUKUS promised Australia brand new, locally built nuclear subs, true sovereign capability, but US shipyards can barely produce 1.1 Virginia-class subs per year, while AUKUS requires 2.33. That gap is impossible to close, so Canberra had to cave instead of new boats. They're buying 3 used Virginia-class subs from the US Navy. From cutting edge to secondhand, Australia not only failed to gain independent sub capability, they effectively surrendered military sovereignty. Even former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull called it a complete sellout of national interest. Billions in public funds, and all they got was a role as America's unpaid gatekeeper. No wonder the deal is deeply unpopular down under. As an American, I'd be lying if I said that doesn't make me a little uncomfortable. We're asking a friend to pay top dollar for our hand-me-downs while taking on all the strategic risk. It's like selling your neighbor a used car at a premium and then asking them to park it in their driveway so your house looks safer. Eventually, they're going to realize they're the ones paying for your security. And when that realization hits, the political fallout could be ugly already. There are whispers in Canberra about renegotiating the terms, and some Australian politicians are openly questioning whether this deal serves their country's interests at all. So, with all that in mind, what can China do to counter this underwater stranglehold? Persistent blue water presence. For years, the assumption was that Australia's southern isolation gave it a natural security buffer. But lately, the PLA Navy has been regularly sailing through the Torres Strait and conducting exercises off Sydney's outer waters. Not just showing the flag, but systematically collecting vital oceanographic data, underwater topography, and acoustic conditions. They're slowly building their own situational awareness in that region, breaking the US monopoly on intelligence and dismantling Australia's so-called safe haven geography. From our perspective, that's a wake-up call. Beijing is no longer content to stay north of the equator. They're coming down to our allies' front yards and they're learning the lay of the land. Every time a Chinese destroyer appears off the Australian coast, it's a signal that the southern buffer is shrinking, and that should worry us. Because it means they're not just reactive, they're proactive. And they're willing to play the long game. They're mapping the ocean floor, studying currents, and building the kind of local knowledge that can't be bought. Only earned through years of patient deployment. This isn't a one-off stunt. It's a sustained campaign to normalize Chinese naval presence in the Southern Hemisphere, and we ignore it at our peril. Second, a full-spectrum ASW upgrade, moving from coastal defense to far sea denial. Many people wrongly assume that because Stirling is beyond China's land-based missile range, there's no counter, but modern naval warfare isn't about one weapon. It's about integrated systems. China has built a 4-dimensional ASW network space-based satellites, high-res optical and SAR, constantly monitor chokepoints and subwakes, long-range maritime patrol aircraft, now cover most of the Western Pacific. Underwater sonar arrays are deployed in key straits, and surface ships like Type 052Ds and 055S with helo-borne dipping sonars provide mobile hunter-killer groups. This layered system doesn't need to hit Stirling. It just needs to make sure any US sub that enters contested waters is tracked, targeted, and neutralized. No more silent lurking, no more covert blockade. For us, that means our subs can't just waltz in and out. They'll have to run a gauntlet of sensors and hunters every time they sortie, and that's a game changer because stealth is our biggest advantage, and if they can erode that, we lose our edge. The Chinese aren't stupid. They know they can't match us sub for sub, so they're building a system that makes our subs' lives hell every time they go to work. They're investing heavily in underwater drones, seabed sensors, and AI-assisted threat detection, all designed to narrow the gap that we currently enjoy. Looking at the global balance, the US still holds an edge in submarine technology. That's their last real advantage. China's surface fleet, carriers, and conventional subs have caught up fast. The only area where the US retains a generational lead is nuclear attack subs, and that's precisely why they're pouring billions into this underwater net, to compensate for their shrinking dominance everywhere else. But that edge is eroding. As China's next-gen subs come online, as their ASW networks mature, as their far sea logistics expand, that American advantage is shrinking by the year. From where I sit, we're not just defending the status quo, we're trying to slow down an inevitable shift in the balance of power. It's like we're the aging heavyweight champion who still has a great left hook, but the challenger is younger, faster, and learning our moves every round. We might win this fight, but the next one, that's not guaranteed. And that's the uncomfortable truth that our military planners are grappling with right now. They know that every year that passes, China gets a little closer to parity. And when that day comes, our submarine advantage won't be enough to hold the line. So does this 5-sub deployment make life harder for China's carrier groups? Absolutely. Does it raise the cost and complexity of China's blue water operations? No question. But does it seal the exit and cripple the fleet? Not a chance. Strategic choke points are never controlled by a handful of submarines. Great power competition is about total systems, sustained endurance, and strategic depth. A single platform edge cannot defeat an integrated ASW architecture, forward bases in the South China Sea, and growing power projection capability. This isn't a submarine versus submarine duel, it's a fight for the very narrative of maritime dominance in the Indo-Pacific. For us Americans, it's a high-stakes bet. Can we leverage our remaining underwater superiority to buy enough time for a broader strategic reset? Or are we pouring treasure into a sinking ship while China builds its own fleet of quiet, lethal subs right under our noses? Billions of dollars in years of planning. Is this a genuine strategic checkmate or just an expensive placebo? Australia trading sovereignty for a second-hand subfleet, is that really a win? And in the next 5 years, do you think the PLA Navy can crack this underwater barrier and take full control of the Western Pacific? Drop your take in the comments. That's it for today. I'll see you in the next one.